Our mission is to connect STEM and opportunity by making these promises and endeavoring to keep them to our demographic: women, girls in STEM, young people ages 16 to 26, and underserved minority populations. We want to share where do we go from here and how STEM is the pathway forward and answers and checks the boxes to education, employment, equal opportunity, and economic empowerment. It is vital that we tap into all of these areas that are fundamental to the shift that we see going on today. So with that said, I'd like to direct our very first question to Ms. Mullen. We have gone through disaster in this country in prior years. Why is COVID-19 so different?
Thank you, Dr. Karen. Thinking about where we are today, we have been in the midst of a pandemic for about 5 or 6 months. And this challenge is very different because of the level of disruption to our lives. If we think about usual stressors of families, they are death, they are divorce, they are either losing a job change, it could be sickness, and usually you might have one or two of those things happen to you. And if you have one or two of them happening, you could be subject to depression, experiencing grief. However, we've had all of those things happening at the same time. We've had people who one day went to work and now everybody is at home. While we have technology that can bring us together, we're still missing that physical connection, which is why instead of social distancing, I think we should talk about physical distancing, because we should still be socially interacting with each other, but just physically distancing from each other. We've got people who have lost jobs. We have children that are home. We have parents who overnight have become teachers and had to figure out the technology while trying to figure out either how to get a new job, how to keep the job they have, how to work from home while they have children who are being educated from home. We have people who are sick because we have people who've gotten sick and have recovered from the coronavirus, but there are a number of people who have ongoing, lingering illnesses. We have had deaths. I have experienced death in my family. I have experienced people in my immediate circle. And I mean, when I start to count the number, it's actually a lot. I have friends, I have family members who have been impacted by the coronavirus. And so it's happened all at once, and it's happened to all of us at once. It's not, it's think about disaster season. There's hurricane season. And down in Florida, there's going to be hurricanes. Well, we in Georgia may feel some of the rains and some of the winds from the hurricanes. We might have a tornado, but it's like a hurricane has hit the whole United States. And all of us have been impacted by it in one way or another. And oftentimes it's been multiple ways. So we are having to deal with all of the stressors all at once. And we're still trying to figure out how to make this work. And so it's been a lot, and it's been a lot all at once. And so that's why it's different. And that's why it's going to remain to be different until we can figure out how to get our arms wrapped around this virus. It's going to continue to impact everywhere. It's going to impact, our daily lives. It's going to impact our workplaces. It's going to impact our educational areas. And so I don't know about you guys, but when I go outside, I am stressed just having to be around groups of people. And this is coming from someone who was always with groups of people. And so now it's stressful. When I go outside, I'm like, whew, when I get back in the house, I have to take a nap.
Yes, yeah.
We are definitely seeing a new normal, and that's so true. Everything that you said, it's so new, and the stressors happening all at once, like you said, most people aren't accustomed to. So with all of these changes, we are going to have to figure out how to move forward, and how does our world work with everything that has literally been disrupted. It's like things thrown up in the air, and we don't know where they're going to land. They're still up in the air. And that's so unsettling when it comes to planners like me, who are, generally, logistically following a flow, a schedule, a plan. And when you don't know from day to day, it can be unsettling. So now I would like for us as the Atlanta S.T.E.M Foundation to help make some strides in giving people some hope on what lies ahead and what we can do moving forward. What to do when everything starts to settle, when the pieces really start to look like they're landing. I want our community, I want us as an organization to be at the forefront to help people to be able to navigate and to negotiate this new normal, this new life. And I'm very grateful that as an organization, we have had foresight to start planning now, because a lot of the conversation that we're hearing on a day-to-day basis, we're getting mortality rates, we're getting current job loss rates, and the conversation has not pivoted to what to do next. So with that said, Mr. Cora, as we pivot to leveraging STEM as the pathway forward, the current moment, what longer term implications do you envision this having on the economy or on society at large?
Thank you, Dr. Karen. I really appreciate the invitation to speak here in this forum. I think there's a few things to unpack with that specific question. And maybe I should start out by outlining what I believe would happen if we don't pivot to leveraging and focusing on STEM as the pathway forward. The last numbers that we have from the Bureau of Labor Statistics was that by the beginning of 2019, there were about 2.4 million unfilled STEM jobs in our country. And that figure was expected to double over the course of the next decade. So, not only does that staggering metric have, I think, a deterring macroeconomic effect on our society, as it certainly stalls tangible plans that many enterprises would have that require that labor. But there's also opportunity costs that are also levied on the innovation, on expanding opportunity, and frankly, on economic growth. And I'd also add that in the same way that, several hundred years ago, the increasing literacy was part of our DNA, right? I think nowadays we talk about these developing regions, developing countries, where you can see a proven link between increasing their literacy and continued growth and innovation. Very similarly, I think that focusing on STEM literacy as part of the basic educational curriculum will absolutely unleash a dramatic potential for developed countries like the US. But STEM literacy, I think, needs to be viewed as a foundational element around which all industries and occupations orient themselves. So it's not just a matter, I think, of filling these vacant STEM jobs and opportunities. STEM literacy, I think, is what's truly going to fuel the next technological revolution. And so, workers of all stripes, I think, going forward are really going to assume that sort of basic STEM literacy to meet the demands of the future. And I think it's also, I guess, critically important to really consider the moment that we find ourselves in. Again, whether we're contemplating the COVID response that our leaders are putting forth, the clear environmental crisis that has links to the pandemic as well, or the very valid demands towards racial justice in this country. I think we absolutely have an opportunity before us to reinvent ourselves and to really
Absolutely.
use the tools and the techniques that STEM affords us to work past many of these challenges and really be successful at it. If there's anything that the millions of vacant STEM jobs highlights, is first, the status quo is just not working. I mean, how can we continue to drag on unemployment, underemployment, sort of the gig economy and all of these things when millions of solid STEM jobs are continuing to lie dormant? And then I think the second thing I think that it highlights is the sheer opportunity that's in front of us to focus on that STEM literacy, particularly in underrepresented and disadvantaged communities where there's the most untapped potential and where, again, these communities, from my perspective, would stand to gain the most from that enablement in STEM literacy.
That is a dynamic answer. The unfilled jobs, the ability for us to answer the questions links very much to where we are right now. For the young woman who thinks that there are no more opportunities because she just lost her job and does not know where skills are, we have a whole platform of money that is available for new STEM training. And we're going to talk about some of those resources later in our webinar. But for the young person who think that the future is everything is done, has been done, well, guess what? The 20th century has closed her eyes, and the opportunities that the 20th century provides us with artificial intelligence, robotics, being able to create outposts on Mars and on the moon. The National Academy of Engineers highlights 10 major challenges that we're facing now that are for a population of the planet with the people of our size. So there are so many opportunities that young people can get engaged with, and that STEM checks the box for. And then lastly, when we're looking at underserved communities, talking about access and social justice, well, when you have the answer to a question and you can critically think and problem solve, which are the currency of the 21st century. Because if in the Industrial Revolution, the currency of the day was manual labor, and many of those systems have become obsolete, what else is there but critical thinking and problem solving and solutions-oriented inquiry practices? So with the many challenges of the 21st century, we need people to do them, to answer them, to solve them, to develop the technologies and the innovations that's going to move us forward, because we're only 20 years into a century that's still burgeoning. So I think that what you're saying is correct, that with the jobs, with the disruption that we talked about before, and the jobs that are available. So our target market, young women, women who are in minority communities, who are career changers. When you're talking about the underserved and disenfranchised youth, STEM is the perfect pathway for. No, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but we definitely can prepare with what we have in our hands.
Well, Dr. Ken, I'd like to add that one of the things that COVID has exposed a lot of inequities, but it's also created a number of opportunities. But but in creating those, it has also changed the way that our job market and education will move going forward. There are some jobs that have been lost at this juncture that are not coming back.
Right.
And
Right.
so those people, the people we have who've experienced job loss at this point, we've really got to think about how do we move forward, because there are jobs and there will be jobs, but it is about making sure that we have a labor force that will match the job market that we have that will develop post-COVID. There are people who suddenly had to learn new skills that didn't have to learn them before. I know people who work on computers, but they only work to the point that they have to. They've never taken that next step to really learn computers. Well, this pandemic has forced people to learn new sets of skills, and they've had to learn how to use some of the technology that they've always had or have had access to for a few years. They've had to learn it in depth where they did not have to learn it before. And so COVID has, it has, while it is a pandemic and there is a lot of tragedy, there are going to be some things that grow out of that tragedy, just like any other tragedy. Communities will build back. If we stick with the hurricane analogy, when the hurricane comes in and either knocks everything down or floods everything out, people come back and rebuild. And so we are going to rebuild post-COVID. The question is, how are we going to rebuild? And when we rebuild, will everybody be able to participate in that market? And so we have so many STEM jobs that are currently unfilled. And then there's a number of jobs that are going to be filled by robotics. And so the people who are currently holding those jobs are going to have to learn new skills, because those jobs are going away, and it doesn't have anything to do with COVID. COVID is certainly exacerbating it.
Right.
But the change is coming. There are just some technologies, there are some fields, there are some things that are going away. And if we think about the things that have happened I can just say in my lifetime, as a child, there was a rotary phone. At some point, we went to a push button phone.
That's right.
And then at some point, we went to a cell phone. And I can share with y'all, I've had a cell phone for 30 years. Because I got a cell phone I'm about to tell on my age, when I was a child. But I've had a cell phone for 30 years. And what has changed with that cell phone just in that 30 years? Because initially all you could do was call. And I remember when we paid for daytime minutes and you waited until the evening to talk on those free minutes.
That's right.
We didn't send text. And we have gone from a phone with barely, just calling capabilities to it is now a full-fledged computer. It's a scanner. It's a camera. It's a recording device. You can do literally we've gone from that one, and that's just in the span of my lifetime. And so how many jobs did driving all of that technology to this one device? Because there are people who are out of jobs now in making this change. But there are also companies that have adapted along with that. And so they've been able to survive. And so that's going to be the key, is Can we adapt?
Yep.
Who will adapt? And how will they adapt?
And if you don't mind, Dr. Ken, I'll just quickly
Please.
piggyback on one of those comments. I would just,
Please.
again, to highlight the 2.4 million STEM jobs are the result of a 20th century curriculum and the 20th century education.
Absolutely.
Once we infuse our curriculums with broader STEM literacy, we will see that 2.4 million vacant exponentially increase. So that's really the potential that we're speaking about here, and why it also can be such a dramatic, repository and well of opportunity for many of our disadvantaged and underserved communities.
I wholeheartedly agree. Mr. Cora, I have been working for the past 20 years, even before the 20th century closed her eyes, to use critical thinking, problem solving, and inquiry, solutions-based inquiry, learning, and practices to be the foundation of educational content. Because if you are teaching a child how to solve a problem, regardless of the content, you're building a skill. So the skill is what we are looking for to be the product of an education, not, I hate to say it, regurgitation. Because in the 21st century, we need problem solvers. So when you're talking about the major challenges that the National Academy of Engineers are looking that we have to solve at this current time, nuclear, biomedicine, oh my gosh, being able to have enough food supply, a carbon system, oh my goodness, medical intelligence, artificial intelligence, all of these things that they are saying that this is what the world will need. Being able to regurgitate facts or the laws that govern the physical world of matter, energy, force, all of these things will not help us if we don't know how to apply them. So when you teach critical thinking in the context of the content, you provide an opportunity for students to build their skill on how to solve a problem that's germane to each content that is introduced. So the skill of critical thinking and problem solving transcends the content. And that's what we want. We want to build thinkers in the 21st century, because thinkers are going to get us to being able to extract the frozen H2O that's on Mars right now, or to be able to use artificial intelligence to continue to bridge the gap with cybersecurity. So there are a number of myriad of things that we need thinkers for, and STEM literacy, critical thinking and problem solving skills are just the way to get that done. So when you're talking about education and you're talking about jobs, it's all working together. So as the dust settles, we have as our target market, our audience can look to say, okay, well, I'm 23 years old, I don't have a job. However, the Georgia technical system has 17 careers that they're willing to give scholarships for. Let me see which one of those are part of my interest. Why won't I start with a job training program for our young women who want to have a different option in life? Because education is the great equalizer, especially for our underserved communities. Georgia Quick Start is a great opportunity, and it's georgiaquickstart.org. And we do have friends in other states, so you can check your State Department of Economic Development for those opportunities as well. But in terms of where we are laying the pathway forward and how to get there. The education system, the economic development system. We're laying the foundation for social equality, because the answer is needed regardless of any human factor, race, gender, socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter, because if you have an answer, when Mary Jackson had the answer to how to get the first astronaut on the moon, they didn't care what her gender was or her race. They just knew that she had the calculation. And guess what? She is going to have her name on NASA's headquarters in DC because she had the answer, not necessarily because of her gender and her race. We're thankful that an African-American woman but she has the capacity, she has the brain power, the ability, right? So we invite everyone to engage STEM to answer the questions of the 21st century. So now that we're talking about being in the 21st century, Mr. Cora, how has technology, or how are technology providers responding to the opportunity that this disruption represents?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that different technology providers are absolutely taking advantage of the opportunity the disruption represents, but in varying degrees. And I'll explain. Those that had previously invested in building an agile development approach to their R&D teams, I think are at a bit of an advantage as they can more quickly maneuver their workload to attend to the new realities that the pandemic has imposed on those industries that they serve. Now, those that hadn't made those investments previously would certainly find it tougher to quickly reorient their development work to provide the functionalities that would address challenges that COVID presents their customers. And again, I say that as non-agile technology providers may be stuck delivering perhaps functionality that had been defined 12 months ago, and frankly may not be quite as relevant to their customers in this new reality that the pandemic represents. I would also add that cloud-based solutions specifically provide customers the ability to quickly adapt to the changing dynamics of COVID. Not only can cloud-based deployments more quickly accommodate, say, increased resources such as compute power, RAM, et cetera, on infrastructure, which, by the way, we've seen a number of industries have to do, like the grocery industry, because of increased demands or fluctuations in order profiles and data ratios, et cetera, right? But again, cloud-based deployments can also deploy innovation to be leveraged by their customers much more quickly than those that are on-premise. And I think much of this innovation, really being specifically to address the particular challenges that the pandemic represents. So, when we talk about things like speed to value, it's absolutely essential to be able to kind of provide that speed to value for technology providers when they're trying to drive competitive advantage. And I guess one final note, there are some technology providers that are also responding to disruption, really thinking and playing the long game. They're investing in the future. They're providing notable incentives to broaden out their client base.
Right.
Whether it's virtual connectivity platforms like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and others, you're seeing some of these providers are offering up their solutions and their platforms for either free or close to free in order to expand that customer base and really sort of cement that brand recognition and probably more importantly, that consumer identification, which is so critical to retaining those customers from a long-term perspective. So those are the types of things that you're seeing from some of the different technology providers.
Wow, that's very amazing that you say that when you're talking about disruption. So we have a disruption to our daily commute, a disruption to our working environment. We're at home. We at one point we were buying groceries and wiping them down with Lysol wipes. There were so many disruptions. But one of the major disruptions, and I'm very grateful that just like the retail and the business community has had to be agile and to be able to pivot in order to meet the demands of the customers, of society, of production. So we have had to do the same thing in our personal lives. So if a company had to shift from on I guess you call it hardware to cloud-based
premise.
forms, then we as individuals have to do the same thing. So Ms. Mullen, I would ask you one of the things that you're most familiar with working with parents and children and being in the legal system. How have you seen and what parents response being to their child's first teacher again? And how do you see the whole homeschooling thing working? And what are parents saying? Because this is a lot of where you are in that space. Where are you with where parents are feeling about homeschooling and their children back to school for COVID?
If you look around, there's been a lot of parent groups that have formed on social media. So you can see a lot of chatter. I've seen a number of parents that said that they were not sending their children back to school anyway, if they were physically going to have to report back into a building. And so I see kind of a renewed interest in homeschooling, and a renewed interest in homeschooling for minority parents that maybe wasn't there before.
Okay.
I also see parents talking about cooperative education, maybe working in small cooperative learning units together. And then there's some parents that are okay with the education being online. And there are some parents that want to go back face to face. And so interestingly enough, one of the parent groups that I kind of dip in and out of happens to be a college parent group. So we think about these things being K-12, but you also have to think about this, the spectrum of education, because we have parents who are really concerned about their college students and putting their college students back in a dorm. And, you know, the parents are, you know, talking about the responsibility level of the students and what the expectations are, and how will the school monitor or make sure that the campus is safe. Then you go all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum, where you go below K, where you have parents who need childcare for work, and about putting their children back in a daycare. So when we talk about education being disrupted, we're talking about the whole continuum of education being disrupted. And how are those parents going to adjust? Because the parents' work environments are also adjusting. So how do I manage being at home, maybe working, and then also having children in the home who are supposed to be in school? And the other thing that we've had a real reckoning around is access to internet, because a number of families don't have access to technology, or they're technology limited. Because it's one thing for us to be at home and we play on a computer. It's another thing for everybody in the house to need a computer.
Right.
And to be on the internet. So we're not actually just talking about access to internet. We're talking about the bandwidth to support every device in the house for work and learning. And so we're going to have to, as a country, think about infrastructure and move beyond infrastructure being highway.
Right.
We have to think about, have we built our technology infrastructure to support everywhere, to support jobs everywhere, to support learning everywhere. The other thing that has really changed is we're really going to have a reckoning about where people work. And so I don't know if you saw the announcement, but Google is not sending their folks back until 2021. So they're already projected into next year. There are places that are already telling their employees that you're not going to come back to a work site, or your work environment is going to change. So that's going to ripple, because just like that daily drive rippled, people not going into buildings, it will ripple, because in the building that I work in, there are small businesses there. And if we are no longer in that building, there are no people to patronize those small businesses. So those businesses will either have to relocate, or they may close. So all of this is, there's a continuous ripple that is happening. We're also, we're thinking about healthcare. You know, you can now see your doctor on your computer. Do you have to go in? What are those visits? What infrastructure and technology and what support will our healthcare providers need to support this new reality?
Wow.
So there are lots of changes that are just going to happen naturally. And so we're going to have to really work and think about going forward, what does this world look like? And one other point that I wanted to put on the table is, when the workplace changes, how your workforce looks will change. And so there may be some people who didn't have opportunities before that have opportunities now. So I'll just give you an example using me. I have been home since mid-March. And, I've been working every day, and my office is just right up the street, but I've been working every day. And somewhere therein, it hit me that literally I could move to another state and work. I just have to figure out the work hours. But if I am not reporting in to the office every day, could I, in theory, move to a different state and work for the same place and do the exact same work? And would it be cheaper for me to move to a place with a lower cost of living? And even if I had to report to work one day a week, would it be cheaper for me to fly to work every day for that one day and fly back out, or fly in for a couple of days and fly back out if I'm living in a place with a lower cost of living?
Wow.
So
that is interesting.
So those are some questions that I think employers are going to have to reckon with, because they will now be able to hire people across the country if that person can make their work hours. So I may be able to work in New York but not live in New York. Whereas before I may had to live in New York because they required me to report into an office every day.
That is dynamic. That brings up another point of competition. And I know why the narrative of some of us have turned to everybody's a winner, everybody gets a trophy at the end of the game. Well, that's not how life works. Life is very competitive, and we have to remember that, I hate to use this analogy, but it's survival of the fittest, right? So who can fulfill those obligations the best, fulfill the responsibilities the best, they're going to be rewarded with the job. So we need to really think about competition from a geographical location perspective, that we want our kids to do the best. We want people to strive to be the very best at their skill, the very best at their trade, because the very best, those are the ones that are going to win out. Which brings me to one of our final points. We're almost at the end of our time. But when we talk about, you brought up a very good point about moving forward, and when it is time for us to rebuild and looking at where we live, where we would like to work. Would it be great if we could live on an island and report to work thousands of miles away? That's people's dream, right? But when you think of what's going to be needed when we build back, what's going to be needed for the new foundation of the new normal, for the 21st century, what is going to be the best and the greatest opportunity? What industries are going to be needed the most? In the Industrial Revolution, everybody was looking for steel. Steel was king in the Industrial Revolution. Now we're going to technology. We're going to 5G. We'll have people who are marginalized because they don't have the infrastructure for technology or computer hardware, software, things of that nature. So we want to look at the foundational pillars of what are going to be for our society. What are the foundational pillars that, and Ms. LaCora, I'd like for you to chime in.
Can
at
I just
any moment.
interject for a second?
Yeah, please.
You know what, sister, what is her name? Dr.
Chantel Mullen?
Yes, Miss Mullins was so on point, because I'm presently looking for work, but I want to do it at home. And what these companies are doing is using the word remote, which means working from home. And I'm getting offers from different states. I don't have to live in California to get a job in California. So she's right. The dynamic's going to change, and it's going to be something different than people really realize. That's correct. Because I'm experiencing it right now. You don't have to work in a state to be able to work there. You can work anywhere you want to work for the same company.
And it's gonna change the way our workforce looks, because if you think about it, pre-COVID, there were places that attracted people from all over, but in some places you just needed people. You hired from pretty much the people who were around, people who were willing to move.
Right.
Now that's off the table.
That's right.
Because there are a lot of jobs that are you're going to be able to do it remotely, which means that there's going to be a premium on home offices. We are going to be looking at how much I want to see how quickly our country is going to invest in infrastructure for the internet, and to see if internet becomes technically a right, so everybody has access to internet, because we don't. We assume that we do,
right?
Because we live in an area where we have it, but there are some places that do not have access to internet. And I think that is going to be the next place. I think that's where the jobs are going to be, because they're going to need to lay that cable. They're gonna have people going throughout the country. They're gonna have to put in those nodes so people can get access to internet. And I think that is a field that's going to explode very quickly, because I think money will come, and I think the people who are ready to jump on that and build that network out, and I think the companies who are thinking forward, are probably trying to map out where and when and how much will it cost to get internet to these places, because that becomes an untapped market. Because if you can get internet to those places, those are people that can apply for jobs all across the country. They're no longer limited to their own community, and they may not have to move out of their community, which may revitalize some communities.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because people move for jobs, they may be able to do a good paying, high quality job from their home if they have internet.
And I'm finding that in some companies, they're actually supplying equipment for you to use at home.
Yes.
They're giving it to you.
Yes.
So it's going to be a plus.
Yes, definitely.
And I would actually add that, speaking from experience, because I did live in an island in the Caribbean for about 12 years and worked from home and out of Puerto Rico for my current employer as well. So I do have a little bit of experience in this virtual work from home model, which I think has been beneficial for me during the COVID days as well. But yes, for some time now, we've been in that sort of, we've had the infrastructure and we've had the wherewithal to be able to, continue to enable the types of opportunities for remote employment and for virtual types of opportunities. And I think that you're absolutely right. It's going to also allow for people to, to be able to take their purchasing power and the power of their purse to the corresponding communities that they decide they want to eventually establish themselves and their kids in, which is, I think, a good thing, especially when you talk about perhaps more developing communities and so forth. The question I think you were headed towards, Dr. Karen, around the sort of the foundational pillars of this next wave. I truly do believe that we will have to, as a country, institute a sort of Marshall Plan type of response to the current moment. And I think, Ms. Mullen did a great job of highlighting all the different areas that are not only impacted, by this disruption, but also the opportunities that it also presents at a sort of macroeconomic level, for our country. But I think, as far as the sort of the foundational pillars that would drive our transformation going forward, I think about things like energy, which has always been a bit of a thorn on the side for everybody in the world. And, there's a lot of things that kind of feed into that, which is, do we continue to rely on sort of non-renewable sources, or should we kind of try to power ourselves up with, some of these different renewable energy grids and so forth. So energy is a big deal because as we continue to consume and expand on the internet and all of the potential that it offers up, we will continue to require additional energy sources to be able to make sure everybody's covered. I think about the connectivity and access to knowledge, being able to stay connected with other human beings, to be able to enable the type of virtual remote models that we were just talking about, as well as ensuring that there's a full equal access to knowledge throughout all of our communities through the internet, being able to make sure that we can lay the infrastructure, the cable and everything else that's going to ensure that access, especially to those communities that currently don't have it, is laid forth. I think about things like precious metals, and the need for these precious metals in order to be able to build out and enable the smart devices and the sort of the compute power that is going to facilitate much of the work that's going to happen in the future. So all of those are sort of foundational pillars to ensuring that we're able to kind of push forward that Marshall Plan to be able to work past the current moment. But the most important thing, and it's something that I know that we've discussed in our board meetings in the past, is really enabling and facilitating that knowledge expansion within our citizens, within our communities, with the individuals that are going to actually leverage all of those other foundational pillars to be able to move us forward in this moment. So that would be my response to that.
That's powerful. Well, I'm telling you, I really believe that we are on the cusp of the next move and looking forward to where we go. It's the path that we've never traveled before. We don't know what it looks like, but guess what? We are, I believe, at the forefront of the conversation to help, to guide our industry, our nation, our world. I think that if we continue just to stay and to be the voice for change and where the change is going to land, we will give the people in our community, especially those who are women, STEM for girls, young minorities who are undisturbed and who do not have access to opportunities. This is the great equalizer. STEM is the great equalizer. for young people ages 16 to 26, or millennials who are career changers. So STEM answers the question, check the boxes for education, economics, employment, and equal opportunity. So the board members of the Atlanta STEM Foundation, I want to thank you so much for lending your expertise and your genius to be able to help to facilitate this conversation, but also when we do get back to a semblance of normal, and it won't be social distancing. Ms. Mullen, what'd you call it?
Physical distancing.
Physical distancing. We will have those programs in place. Career training in STEM is very much on the heart and mind of the Atlanta STEM Foundation. Career coaching. Being able to walk people through the process, having these STEM challenges that induces critical thinking and problem solving, creating strategic partnerships so that young people who would not necessarily have access to Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, to have this technology that we read about and see on television, to have them actually to be able to hold it in their hands, and the executives who are driving this technology and innovation are their mentors. That's very important to us. And that's what we want to continue to move forward and to drive through. So with that said, we want to thank you very much. Please check out our resource page and our website, www.atlantastemfoundation.org. And if nothing else, thank you again. And I bid all of our members, all of our viewers, a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.